I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. 3 days ago, I knocked on my daughter's door, dirty and desperate, asking for a place to sleep. She slammed it in my face without a second thought. My son handed me $50 through a crack in his door, then pushed me away like I was a beggar on the street. But when I arrived at my youngest son's tiny house, everything changed. He and his wife welcomed me in from the cold, gave me their only bed, and that night I heard them whispering about sacrificing their dream of having a baby just to help me. They had no idea who I really was. They didn't know I owned $58 million. They didn't know this was all a test. And when the truth came out the next morning when my lawyer arrived with security guards and bank statements, the looks on my older children's faces weren't just shock. They were pure terror. Because in that moment, they realized they had just lost everything. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the night I understood I had created monsters with my own money. The silence in my office was suffocating. I sat alone on the 23rd floor watching the city lights blur through the windows. At 61 years old, I'd built an empire that supplied textiles to every major clothing chain across the country. My company, Miller Textiles, had revenue that would make most CEOs jealous. But that night, none of it mattered. I stared at the spreadsheet glowing on my screen. 12 years of financial records. Every check I'd written to my children since my husband died. Every bailout, every emergency, every desperate phone call that ended with me opening my checkbook. Elizabeth, $2.1 million over 7 years. William, $1.8 million over 10 years. Isaac, $3,500 total. And that was a graduation gift he tried to refuse. My phone lit up on the mahogany desk. Elizabeth, again. This was her third call today, and I knew exactly what she wanted before I even answered. Mom, finally, I've been trying to reach you all day. Her voice had that edge it always got when she wanted something. Listen, I need to talk to you about the kitchen renovation. I closed my eyes. Elizabeth, we talked about this last month. I gave you... I know, but the contractor found issues with the plumbing. The whole thing needs to be redone. It's going to be another $100,000, maybe a little more. She said it so casually, like she was asking to borrow $20 for lunch. $100,000. The wives at the club are doing their kitchens. Mine looks outdated. Robert's partners are coming for dinner next month, and I can't have them seeing... Elizabeth. My voice came out harder than I intended. I just gave you $80,000 for that kitchen 3 months ago. Silence. Then, well, things change. Are you going to help me or not? The casual entitlement in her voice made my chest tight. This was my daughter, the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart. When had she become this person? I need to think about it, I said quietly. Think about it, Mom. The contractor needs an answer by Friday. I can't believe you're making this difficult. She hung up before I could respond. I set the phone down with shaking hands. 2 minutes later, it rang again. William this time. Mom, I'll make this quick. I'm between surgeries. Always so efficient, my middle son. I've got an investment opportunity. A friend from medical school is opening a private practice, and he's looking for investors. $70,000 gets me in on the ground floor. William, you make $400,000 a year. Why do you need... Because my capital is tied up. And this is time sensitive. I thought you'd wanted to help me build my portfolio. That tone. That subtle accusation that if I didn't help, I was somehow failing as a mother. I'll think about it. Think about it. His voice sharpened. Mom, opportunities like this don't wait. I need an answer by tomorrow. And honestly, after everything you spent on my education, I thought you'd want to see me succeed. He hung up too. I sat there in the dark, my hands trembling. Everything you spent on my education. As if my love, my sacrifice, my years of working 18-hour days to give them opportunities were just investments I'd made that now needed to pay dividends. Then my phone rang a third time. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to answer. I was so tired. Tired of being seen as nothing more than a source of money. Tired of feeling like an ATM instead of a mother. But I answered anyway. Hi, Mom. Isaac's voice was warm, genuine. Just calling to check in. How are you feeling? Did that arthritis medication the doctor prescribed help? I felt tears prick my eyes. Isaac, honey, I'm okay. You don't sound okay. What's wrong? And there it was. The difference. No preamble about money. No transaction disguised as conversation. Just genuine concern for my youngest son, the one who chose to be a teacher instead of chasing wealth, the one his siblings looked down on for settling for so little. Just a long day, I managed. How are you? How's Grace? We're good. Grace's shift at the hospital was brutal yesterday, but she's off today. We're planning to plant tomatoes in the backyard this weekend. Nothing fancy, but it'll be nice to have fresh vegetables. He paused. Hey, do you want to come over for dinner on Sunday? Grace is making her famous pot roast. My throat tightened. When was the last time Elizabeth or William invited me over without needing something? When was the last time they asked how I was feeling without it being a perfunctory question before requesting money? I'd love that, I whispered. After we hung up, I sat in that dark office for another hour. The contrast was so stark it hurt. 2 children who only called when their bank accounts ran low. One who called just to hear my voice. That's when the idea formed. It was crazy, reckless, maybe even cruel, but I needed to know the truth. I needed to see who my children really were when the money was stripped away. When I was no longer their financial safety net, would they still care? Would they still love me? Or would they discard me like yesterday's trash? I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd had memorized for 30 years. Thomas Reed. My lawyer's voice was alert despite the late hour. Thomas, it's Abigail. I need your help with something unusual. Abigail, it's 11 o'clock. Is everything all right? No, I said honestly. Everything is not all right, and I need to do something about it. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? First thing. Of course. What's this about? I took a deep breath. I need to disappear. I need to pretend I've lost everything. And then I need to see which of my children will still open their door for me. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Abigail. Thomas finally said, his voice careful. What exactly are you planning? Thomas tried to talk me out of it for 2 solid hours. We sat in his downtown office, morning sun streaming through the windows while he made every argument he could think of. Too dangerous. Too risky for a woman my age. There were other ways to evaluate my children's character. This was extreme. Abigail, you could get hurt. What if something happens? What if... Thomas, I cut him off gently. I've made up my mind. I need to know the truth. Not what they tell me. Not what they pretend. I need to see their hearts when they think no one important is watching. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. You're not going to change your mind, are you? No. Then at least let me set up proper safety measures. Security team at a distance. Tracking device. Check-ins every 12 hours. Agreed, but they have to stay hidden. This has to be real. Thomas pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. How long are you planning to do this? 5 days on the streets to make it convincing, then 3 days testing them. I had thought it all through during my sleepless night. I'll go to Elizabeth's house first, then William's, then Isaac's. And if they all reject you, I didn't have an answer for that. The possibility that all 3 of my children might close their doors on me was too painful to contemplate, but I had to know. Then I'll know where I stand, I said quietly. And I can adjust my will accordingly. Thomas's expression shifted. You're serious about this? Dead serious. If my children only love me for my money, then they don't need it when I'm gone either. Over the next 2 days, Thomas helped me plan every detail. He arranged for my CFO to run the company temporarily, citing a family emergency. He got me a burner phone with only his number programmed in. He hired a discreet security team who would follow me but never intervene unless I used a code word. The hardest part was the physical transformation. I stood in the thrift store on Tuesday morning, surrounded by racks of worn clothing. The smell of mothballs and old fabric filled my nose as I selected items that would make me look like someone who'd been living on the streets. A gray wool coat with a torn lining, stained khaki pants 2 sizes too big, shoes with the sole peeling away from the leather, a man's flannel shirt that had seen better days. Everything cost less than $30 total. In the store's bathroom, I changed out of my tailored suit. I pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail. I rubbed dirt under my fingernails. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back at me looked desperate, defeated, invisible, perfect. I shoved my jewelry, my wallet, my real phone into a locker I'd rented at the bus station. Everything went into a plastic bag with a few essentials, a change of clothes, basic toiletries, a worn blanket. Not enough to look prepared, just enough to look like someone barely surviving. Thomas met me one last time before I started. "You can still change your mind," he said, his face creased with worry. "Abigail, please. This is dangerous." "I'll be fine. You'll call every night at 9. If you miss a check-in, I'm sending the team to bring you home." "I understand." He handed me the burner phone. "The security team has tracking on this. They'll know where you are at all times, but they're under strict orders not to approach unless you signal." I slipped the phone into my coat pocket. "Thank you, Thomas, for everything." "I think you are making a mistake," he said bluntly. "But I also understand why you need to do this. Just be careful." I left his office and walked into a world I'd never experienced before. The first night I slept at the bus station, or tried to. The plastic seats were impossibly uncomfortable. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead all night. The smell of urine and despair clung to everything. A woman around my age sat down next to me around 3 in the morning. Her face was weathered, her clothes as worn as mine. "First time?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Gets easier," she said. "Or maybe you just get numb to it. I'm Marie." "Linda," I said, using the fake name Thomas and I had agreed on. Marie pulled half a sandwich from her bag. Ham and cheese wrapped in wax paper. She tore it in half and offered me a piece. "I can't," I started. "Take it. You look hungry. And out here we share what we got." I accepted the sandwich with trembling hands. The bread was stale, the ham probably past its prime. But Marie had offered it freely without expecting anything in return. This woman who had nothing was willing to share half of her meager meal. When was the last time Elizabeth or William had given me anything without expecting something bigger in return? "How long have you been on the streets?" I asked. 5 years. Lost my job when the factory closed. Couldn't make rent. Things spiral fast once you lose your home. She looked at me with kind eyes. "You got kids?" 3. "They know you're out here." I shook my head. "They will eventually," Marie said sadly. "And you'll find out real quick which ones are worth keeping in your life. My daughter hasn't called me in 3 years. Too embarrassed to have a homeless mother, I guess." We sat in silence after that Two Women Society had rendered invisible, sharing a sandwich at 3 in the morning. The next 4 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and cold. I learned which shelters had the shortest lines. I learned how to avoid the dangerous people who preyed on the vulnerable. I learned what it felt like to have people look through you like you didn't exist. On the morning of the 5th day, I woke up under a bridge, my body aching, my clothes genuinely filthy now. But I was ready to test my children, ready to see their true colors. I pulled out the burner phone and texted Thomas. "Today, starting at noon." His response came immediately. "Team in position. Be safe." I had 3 addresses programmed into an old paper map. Elizabeth's mansion in Golden Gates Gardens, William's modern house in the professional district, Isaac's small rental in the working-class neighborhood across town. I would visit them in order of birth, oldest to youngest. Elizabeth first. My hands shook as I walked toward her neighborhood. Not from cold this time, from fear. Fear of what I might discover. Fear that my worst suspicions might be confirmed. But I kept walking, one painful step at a time, because I needed to know the truth, even if the truth broke my heart. Elizabeth's house sat behind an ornate iron gate like a castle guarding its princess. I stood on the sidewalk staring up at the mansion I'd helped buy. $200,000 for the down payment straight from my personal savings. I remembered Elizabeth's excitement when she and Robert first toured it. How she called me 3 times that day, gushing about the marble countertops and the crystal chandelier in the foyer. Now those gates felt like they were designed to keep people like me, people who looked like me right now, as far away as possible. I pressed the intercom button. My finger left a smudge of dirt on the polished brass. Static crackled. Then Elizabeth's voice clipped an annoyed, "Yes. Elizabeth, it's me. It's Mom." Silence. Long enough that I thought maybe the connection had cut out. "Mom?" Her voice was different now, uncertain. "Is that really you?" "Yes, honey. I need—" The intercom clicked off. For a moment I thought she'd hung up on me. Then the gate buzzed and swung open a few feet. Just enough for a person to squeeze through. I walked up the stone pathway I'd helped pay for. Every step felt heavier than the last. The gardens were immaculate, professionally maintained. Roses bloomed in perfect rows. The fountain gurgled peacefully. The front door opened before I reached it. Elizabeth stood in the doorway wearing yoga pants and a designer athleisure top that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery bill. Her hair was perfectly styled, her nails freshly manicured. Everything about her screamed money and comfort. Her eyes widened when she saw me up close. "Oh my God. Mom, what happened to you?" I saw her look past me, scanning the street, checking to see if any neighbors were watching. That small gesture told me everything I needed to know, but I pushed forward anyway. "Can I come in? I need to talk to you." She didn't move from the doorway. "Of course, but what's going on? Why do you look like—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Like I've been living on the streets," I finished for her. "Because I have been, for 5 days. Her hand flew to her mouth. Why? What happened?" "The company went under. Bankruptcy. The creditors took everything. My house, my car, my savings. Everything." The lies came easier than I expected. Maybe because part of me had always feared this scenario. "I've been trying to figure out what to do, but I need help, Elizabeth. I need somewhere to stay while I sort things out." I watched her face carefully, saw the shock, saw the processing, saw something else flash across her features, something that looked uncomfortably like calculation. "Come in," she finally said, stepping back. But she only let me into the foyer, the gleaming marble foyer that I'd paid for. She didn't invite me further into the house. She just stood there, arms crossed, creating a physical barrier between me and the rest of her perfect life. "I don't understand," she said. "How could the company fail? You were always so careful. Bad investments, partners who embezzled. It happened fast. I was making it up as I went along, but it sounded plausible enough. The lawyers are trying to salvage something, but right now I have nothing. I've been sleeping in shelters, bus stations. Elizabeth, I'm your mother. I just need a place to stay for a little while until—" "Mom," she cut me off, and her voice had that edge again, that tone she used when she was about to say no to something. This is a lot. Robert and we have this dinner tomorrow night, the senior partners from his firm. This is huge for his career. They're considering him for partner and everything has to be perfect. I understand. I won't get in the way. I just need a bed. I could stay in the guest room or even the guest room is being renovated. Remember the kitchen project?" She said it like I should remember, like I should understand why that made it impossible for me to stay. "I could sleep anywhere, Elizabeth. The couch, even the floor. I just need to be somewhere warm and safe." She glanced over her shoulder back into her perfect house. When she looked at me again, I saw something in her eyes that made my chest hurt. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was something worse. It was embarrassment. "Mom, I want to help. I really do. But having you here right now looking like, in your condition, Robert's partners are very traditional, very judgmental. If they saw—" She trailed off again, unable to say the cruel truth out loud. If they saw her homeless mother, it would reflect badly on her. "Elizabeth," I said, and my voice cracked despite my best efforts to stay composed. "I'm your mother. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for a roof over my head for a few nights. I know and I want to help, but not like this. Not right now." She pulled her phone from her pocket, tapped a few times, then showed me the screen. "Look, there's a shelter on 5th Street. It's actually really nice. They have hot meals, clean beds. I'll even pay for a few nights at one of the nicer ones downtown. There's this place that's more like a hotel, really, for women in transition." She was already working out how to help me without having to actually have me in her home. "I'll give you money," she continued, pulling out her wallet. "Here." She counted out bills. $500. More than her siblings would offer, I'd later learn. "Take this. Get a room somewhere clean. Buy some clothes. Get yourself sorted out. And when you're more stable, when you're back on your feet, we can figure out a longer-term solution. Okay?" She held out the money like it was a solution, like it was love. I took it, not because I needed it, but because I needed to see if she would feel better about herself after giving it to me. If it would somehow ease her conscience enough to let her sleep tonight. "Elizabeth, I raised you. I gave you everything. I paid for your education, your MBA in Switzerland that cost over $100,000. I helped with the down payment on this house. And you're turning me away." Her jaw tightened. "I'm not turning you away. I'm trying to help in a practical way. You need to get yourself together first, then we can talk about—" about living arrangements and everything else. But Mom, you have to understand this affects Robert's career. This affects our life. I have responsibilities, and I'm not one of them. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. That's not fair, she said quietly. You're putting me in an impossible position. No, Elizabeth, you put yourself in this position. I'm just asking for help. For a moment I thought I saw tears in her eyes, a flicker of genuine conflict, but then she blinked and it was gone, replaced by resolve. I'm sorry, Mom, I really am, but you can't stay here, not right now. Take the money, go to that shelter, clean yourself up, and then call me in a few days and we'll figure something out. Okay? She was already moving toward the door, already ushering me out. I stood on the threshold of the house I'd helped buy, holding $500 that was supposed to make up for the fact that my daughter valued her social standing more than my well-being. Elizabeth, I said one more time. Please. Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe. Guilt, definitely. But then she shook her head. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. She started closing the door. Call me when you're cleaned up. The door clicked shut. I heard the deadbolt turn. I stood there on the perfectly manicured porch, staring at the solid wood door that had just closed in my face. Through the side window, I saw Elizabeth walk back toward her kitchen. She picked up her phone, started texting someone. Probably Robert, I thought. Probably telling him about the crazy encounter with her homeless mother. Within 30 seconds, she was laughing at something on her phone screen. My legs felt shaky as I walked back down that stone path. The gate closed automatically behind me with a definitive clang, the sound of doors shutting, of being locked out. I made it 2 blocks before I had to sit down on a bus stop bench. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the $500. Thomas had given me an emergency number to call. Part of me wanted to call it right then to call off this whole painful experiment, but I needed to see it through. Elizabeth wasn't the only test. I had 2 more children to visit. Maybe one of them would prove me wrong. Maybe one of them would show me that I hadn't completely failed as a mother. I folded the $500 carefully and put it in my coat pocket. Then I stood up and started walking toward William's house. The sun was setting. The February air was getting colder. And I had 14 miles to walk before I reached my middle child's door. By the time I reached William's neighborhood, my feet were screaming. The broken shoes I'd bought at the thrift store had rubbed blisters on both heels. Every step sent shooting pains up my calves. But I kept walking because I needed to finish this. Needed to know if any of my children would choose me over their comfort. William's house was exactly what I expected from him. Modern. Minimalist. All glass and steel and sharp angles. No warmth. No personality. Just expensive geometric perfection. I rang the doorbell and waited. He answered almost immediately like he'd been expecting someone. Probably thought I was a delivery driver. Mom! His eyes went wide. What the hell? At least he let me inside. That was something. He grabbed my arm and pulled me through the door quickly, then shut it and locked it behind us like he was hiding evidence. What happened to you? He kept his voice low, urgent. Why do you look like that? Where have you been? We stood in his foyer, all white marble and modern art, and I realized he wasn't moving to invite me further inside. He was keeping me contained near the door, just like Elizabeth had. I lost everything, William. The company went bankrupt. The creditors took the house. I've been on the streets for almost a week. He stared at me and I could see his doctor brain working, analyzing, processing, looking for the logical explanation. That doesn't make sense. Your company was solid. The last financial report I saw, embezzlement, bad investments. It happened fast. The lawyers are still sorting through everything, but right now I have nothing. I gestured at myself. This is all I have. I need help, William. I need somewhere to stay. He ran his hand through his hair, looked around like someone might be watching us. Okay, let me think. There's nothing to think about. I'm your mother. I know what you need, Mom. I'm trying to figure out how to help you. But his tone was clipped, professional, like I was a patient presenting with symptoms he needed to diagnose and treat efficiently. Jennifer appeared from the hallway, William's wife and architect as precisely put together as the house she'd designed. She stopped when she saw me, her face going pale. William, what's going on? It's my mother. She's had some financial trouble. Lost everything, apparently. The way he said it, Apparently. Like he wasn't sure he believed me. Like this might be some kind of scam. Jennifer's professional mask slipped into place immediately. Oh my. I'm so sorry to hear that. But she stayed where she was, keeping distance between us. William pulled out his phone, tapped at it a few times. Okay, here's what we're going to do. There's a hotel downtown, the Riverside. It's clean, safe, affordable. I'll book you a room for 5 nights. That gives you time to rest, clean up, figure out your next steps. He was already in solution mode. Fix the problem. Move on. I don't need a hotel, William. I need family. Mom, you need to be practical right now. He pulled out his wallet, counted out bills. $2,000. Much more than Elizabeth had given me. Take this. Book the hotel. Buy some clothes. Get proper meals. Then next week, when I have a few hours free, we'll sit down with my accountant and figure out how to rebuild your finances. William, I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for a place to sleep, for family support. And I'm giving you what you actually need, he said firmly, which is time and space to get yourself together. Mom, you can't stay here. The words hit like a physical blow. Why not? Because... He glanced at Jennifer and something passed between them. Because I have a medical board review next week. The house has to be perfect. I have colleagues coming by. And honestly, Mom, you need more help than I can give you right now. Professional help. Maybe a financial advisor. Maybe therapy. I don't know, but staying here isn't the solution. I'm not a problem to be solved, William. I'm your mother. I know that. But his voice said otherwise. Look, I'm trying to help in a sustainable way. A hotel room and money for essentials is more useful than you sleeping on our couch for a few days. Be practical about this. Jennifer stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Abigail William has surgeries all week. Early mornings, late nights. The house needs to be quiet and organized. With everything you're going through, you need peace and stability, not the chaos of his schedule. The hotel is really the best option for everyone. Everyone. Meaning them. Meaning my being here would disrupt their perfect organized lives. I see. I looked at the $2,000 William was holding out. The money was supposed to make this better. Supposed to make him feel like a good son. So you're both saying I can't stay here? We're saying the hotel is a better choice, William corrected. For you. For your recovery. He was reframing rejection as concern, making it sound like he was doing me a favor by sending me away. I took the money. Watched his face relax just a little. Watched him mentally check this problem off his list. There's one more thing, he said, his voice dropping even lower. This situation, it's better if it stays quiet for now. My patients, they're high-profile people. Politicians, CEOs. If word gets out that my mother is homeless, it raises questions about my judgment, my family stability. You understand, right? I understood perfectly. I was an embarrassment. A liability to his carefully cultivated reputation. So I shouldn't tell anyone, I said flatly. Just until you get back on your feet. Then we can explain it as a temporary setback that you overcame. But right now the optics aren't good. Optics. My homelessness had bad optics for his medical career. I need you to leave now, he said, not unkindly. I have an early surgery tomorrow, 5 a.m. I need to prep and get sleep. He walked me to the door. Put his hand on my shoulder in what probably looked like a comforting gesture, but felt more like he was steering me toward the exit. Call me next Monday, he said. We'll set up a meeting with my accountant. Get you sorted out properly. Okay? Okay, I whispered. The door closed. Not slammed, just closed. Efficiently, like everything William did. I stood in his driveway holding $2,000 and felt even worse than I had after leaving Elizabeth's. At least Elizabeth had shown emotion. Had struggled with her decision, even if she'd ultimately chosen wrong. William hadn't struggled at all. He'd assessed the situation, determined the most efficient solution, and executed it. I wasn't his mother in that moment. I was a problem that needed to be resolved quickly so he could move on to more important things. I checked my watch. Almost 8 p.m. The security team tracking me would be wondering where I was going next. Thomas would be expecting my check-in call in an hour. I had one more house to visit. One more child to test. Isaac's place was on the other side of town. The working-class neighborhood where people drove older cars and houses needed paint. The neighborhood my other children looked down on. It would take me hours to walk there. My feet were already bleeding in my broken shoes. My body ached from days on the street. Every part of me hurt, but I kept walking, because I needed to know if I had any children left who still remembered what family meant. The streets grew darker, colder. I pulled my torn coat tighter and counted my steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one carrying me closer to an answer I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The neighborhood changed as I walked. The pristine mansions and perfect lawns gave way to modest houses with chain-link fences and cars parked on grass. Streetlights buzzed overhead. A dog barked from someone's backyard. Children's toys scattered across porches. This was where Isaac lived, where he and Grace rented a small house on a teacher's salary and a nurse's income. The house his siblings mocked at family gatherings, the neighborhood they couldn't believe anyone would choose to live in. But as I stood on the cracked sidewalk looking at the cream-colored house with its peeling paint and hand-tended flower garden, something shifted in my chest. This place looked like a home, not a showpiece, not a status symbol, a home where people lived and loved and built a life together. I walked up the uneven concrete path. No stone pavers here, no fountain, just a simple walkway lined with flowers Grace had obviously planted herself. Marigolds and petunias, bright spots of color in the fading light. The wooden fence needed repair. The porch had a board that looked loose, but the windows glowed with warm light, and I could smell something cooking. Something that smelled like real food made with love, not catered for appearances. I raised my hand to knock and realized I was shaking. This was it. My last chance to find out if any of my children still knew how to love unconditionally. My knuckles hit the door. 3 soft knocks. I heard footsteps inside. Quick ones. The door opened. Grace stood there in an oversized olive green sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry except her thin wedding band. She was wearing socks with holes in the toes. She looked tired from her shift at the hospital. She looked ordinary. She looked beautiful. Abigail. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God. Abigail. She didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. She grabbed my arm and pulled me inside like the house was on fire and she was saving me from burning. Isaac, she called out. Isaac, come here quick. The warmth hit me first. The house was warm in a way that had nothing to do with the thermostat setting. It smelled like home-cooked food and life lived fully. Isaac appeared from what looked like the kitchen wearing a gray t-shirt and old jeans. When he saw me, his face went through a rapid transformation. Shock. Horror, love, determination. Mom! He was across the room in 3 strides, his arms around me. Mom, what happened? Are you okay? Are you hurt? He held me tight, and he didn't care that I was dirty, didn't care that I smelled like 5 days on the street. He just held his mother and checked to make sure I was still breathing. I'm okay, I managed to say. I'm okay, honey. You're not okay. Grace had disappeared and come back with a clean towel and a glass of water. Isaac, help her sit. Abigail, when did you last eat? I couldn't remember. The sandwich Marie had shared that was yesterday morning, or maybe the day before. Time had started blurring together. I don't know. Grace and Isaac exchanged a look, the kind of look that couples share when they don't need words to communicate. Grace nodded once and disappeared toward the kitchen. Isaac guided me to the couch. The brown fabric was worn with a patch sewn carefully over one arm. But it was soft, comfortable, real. Tell me what happened, Isaac said, kneeling in front of me. Start from the beginning. So I told him the same story I'd told his siblings. The bankruptcy, the creditors, losing everything, being on the streets. Isaac's face crumpled with each detail, not with disgust or calculation or concern for how this affected him, with pure pain for his mother's suffering. Why didn't you call me? He asked when I finished. Mom, why didn't you call me right away? I didn't want to be a burden. I know you and Grace don't have much, and Stop. He took my hands in his. His hands were rough from yard work and teaching from a life of real labor. You are never a burden. Never. Do you understand me? Grace returned with a bowl of soup. Simple vegetable soup that smelled like heaven. She sat down next to me and handed me the bowl with a spoon. Eat slowly, she said gently. If you haven't eaten in a while, your stomach needs to adjust. I took a spoonful. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. Not because it was fancy or expensive, but because it was made with love and offered without question. You're staying here, Isaac said firmly. That's not up for discussion. You're staying here, and we're going to figure this out together. Isaac, you don't have room. You only have one bedroom, and I can't. We have a bed, Grace said. You'll take it. No, I can't take your bed. You need Mom. Isaac's voice was gentle but absolute. We're not arguing about this. You take the bedroom. Grace and I will sleep out here. It's fine. It's not fine. You're young, you need proper rest, you both work so hard. Grace took the soup bowl from my hands and set it on the coffee table. Then she took my hands in hers. Her hands were small but strong. Nurse's hands. Hands that healed people every day. Abigail, listen to me. You are family. Family doesn't sleep on couches when there's a bed available. Family doesn't debate this. You need rest, you need safety, and you need to know you're loved. Her brown eyes met mine steadily. Do you understand you are loved here? And love means giving the best of what we have. I started crying. I couldn't help it. After 5 days of being invisible, of being rejected by my own children, of wondering if anyone in the world still cared about me as a person rather than a bank account, Grace's simple words broke something open inside me. Come on, Grace said, helping me to my feet. Let's get you cleaned up. I heated water for a bath. She led me to the small bathroom. The tiles were old and chipped, the grout stained. The shower curtain was a simple plastic one with patches repaired with duct tape, but there was a towel warming on the radiator and steam rising from the bathtub. I put some of my clothes on the bed for you, Grace said. They'll be a little big, but they're clean. Take your time. We'll have food ready when you're done. She paused at the door. And Abigail, we're glad you're here. We're glad you came to us. She closed the door, giving me privacy. I stood in that tiny bathroom and let myself cry. Really cry. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that I muffled in the towel Grace had left for me. Not because I was sad, because I was relieved, because I had finally found what I'd been looking for. Unconditional love, real family, the kind of home that had nothing to do with money or mansions or marble countertops. I lowered myself into the hot water and felt 5 days of grime and pain start to wash away. Grace's clothes were soft from many washings. The gray sweatpants were too long, the brown sweatshirt hung loose on my frame. But they were clean, and they smelled like cheap laundry detergent and genuine care. When I came out of the bedroom, Isaac and Grace were setting the small dining table. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 forks. Nothing matched. Everything was mismatched secondhand, but it was set with care. Feel better? Isaac asked. Much better. We sat down to eat together. Simple food. Vegetable soup toast with butter, a small salad that Grace had clearly put together from whatever they had in the refrigerator. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. It was the best meal I'd had in years. They didn't make me feel pitied. They talked about normal things. Isaac told me about his students, about a girl named Emma who'd finally grasped fractions after weeks of struggling. Grace talked about a patient at the hospital who'd recovered against all odds. They treated me like a person, like family, like I mattered beyond what I could give them. After dinner, Isaac insisted I go straight to bed. You're exhausted, Mom. You need real rest. But you two need to sleep too, and I can't. We've got it covered, Grace said with a smile. Isaac and I have slept in worse places. Trust me, your couch is luxury compared to some of the on-call rooms I've crashed in. They led me to their bedroom. It was small, barely big enough for a double bed and an old dresser. The sheets were plain white cotton, washed so many times they were soft as silk. On the nightstand was their wedding photo. Isaac in a borrowed suit. Grace in a simple white dress that probably came from a department store clearance rack. Both of them smiling like they'd won the lottery. Sleep as long as you need, Isaac said, kissing my forehead. We'll talk more in the morning. They left, closing the door behind them. I lay down on their bed, the only luxury they owned, and stared at the ceiling. I could hear them moving around in the living room, settling onto the couch that couldn't possibly fit both of them comfortably. Then I heard their voices. Quiet, but not quiet enough. We can't afford 3 people on your salary, Isaac said. My heart stopped. I know, Grace replied. I already thought about it. There was a pause, the sound of a drawer opening. I can pick up extra shifts at the hospital, Grace continued. And you could do summer school tutoring. That would bring in another few hundred a month. Maybe, Isaac said, but he didn't sound convinced. Another pause, longer this time. Isaac, Grace said slowly, we could use the baby fund. I stopped breathing. The baby fund. The money they'd been saving for 2 years to start a family. The dream they'd been working toward, putting aside $20 here, $50 there whenever they had anything extra. Grace had mentioned it last Christmas, her eyes shining with hope. That's $1,200, Isaac said, his voice thick. We've been saving for tea, I know, but your mom needs us now. We're young. We can wait another year or two. But she can't wait. Silence. Grace, you've wanted a baby for so long. I want to be a person you can be proud of more, she said simply. And that means taking care of family when they need us. We can have a baby later. Your mom needs help now. I heard Isaac make a sound like he was trying not to cry. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Yes, you do. We deserve each other. And we're going to do this together. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. These two people who had so little were willing to sacrifice their dream of having a child to help me. Me, the woman who'd looked down on them, who'd thought Grace wasn't good enough for my son, who'd been disappointed when Isaac chose teaching over a more prestigious career. And they were the only ones who'd truly opened their door. I lay in their bed wearing Grace's clothes, listening to them plan how to give up their deepest dream for me, and I understood something profound. I had spent 30 years measuring success by the wrong metrics. I'd taught my children that money equaled worth, that status equaled value, that appearance equaled substance. 2 of them had learned that lesson perfectly, but Isaac had rejected it. He'd found Grace, who understood what really mattered, and together they'd built something my money could never buy. A home, real family, unconditional love. Tomorrow Thomas would arrive with the truth. The bank statements and lawyers and proof that I'd never lost anything except my illusions about my children. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight I lay in this small bed in this humble house and felt more loved than I'd felt in 20 years. Tomorrow would bring reckoning. Tonight brought Grace. And in the living room, 2 people who had nothing were giving me everything. I woke to the smell of cheap coffee and toast. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then the memories flooded back. The test, the rejections, Isaac and Grace's unconditional welcome, the conversation I'd overheard about the baby fund. I sat up in their bed, my body aching from days on the street. Through the thin walls I heard movement in the kitchen. Someone was making breakfast. The clock on the nightstand read 6:47 a.m. Early, I got up slowly, pulled on Grace's oversized sweatshirt, and opened the bedroom door. Grace was alone in the kitchen, still wearing scrubs from what must have been a night shift at the hospital. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun. When she saw me, she smiled. Good morning. Did you sleep? Better than I have in days. It was true, despite everything I'd slept deeply in their bed. Grace, you just got off work. You should be sleeping. I will, after breakfast. She poured coffee into a chipped mug and handed it to me. Isaac already left for school. He has to get there early on Fridays. We sat at the small table together. Grace pushed a plate of toast toward me along with a jar of store-brand strawberry jam. Grace, I need to... I started. I know, she said quietly. I froze. What is... She met my eyes steadily, those intelligent brown eyes that never missed anything. I know this is a test, Abigail. I've known since you arrived. My mouth went dry. How that? Your hands. She gestured at them. Under the dirt, they're soft, manicured, not the hands of someone who's been homeless for a week. She took a sip of her coffee. Your posture, the way you observe everything, cataloging details. And your story, it has holes. A woman with your business experience doesn't lose everything overnight without warning signs. I couldn't speak. I'm a nurse, Grace continued. I'm trained to observe, to see what people don't say as much as what they do say. And within 5 minutes of you being here, I knew something wasn't adding up. But you didn't say anything. You and Isaac, we still welcomed you because that was the right thing to do. She set down her mug. Test or no test, you came to our door asking for help. The answer doesn't change based on whether you're really homeless or pretending to be. I stared at this woman I'd underestimated for years. This woman I'd thought wasn't educated enough, sophisticated enough, good enough for my son. She'd seen through me immediately, and she'd chosen authenticity anyway. Why are you telling me now? I asked. Because whatever you're planning to do today, you need to be ready for the consequences." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Truth cuts both ways, Abigail. When you reveal this test to Elizabeth and William, you won't just be judging them. They'll be judging you too." "I know. Do you—" She leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, this test says as much about you as it does about them. Maybe more." Her words hit hard. "What do you mean?" "You created the environment that made them who they are. You taught them that money solves problems, that appearance matters more than substance. They learned those lessons from you." She paused. "I'm not saying what they did was right. Closing the door on their mother was wrong. But you set the stage for it years ago." I felt tears prick my eyes. I know I did. So when this all comes out today, and I assume that's what's happening today based on how you keep checking that phone in your coat pocket, remember that. Remember that you're not just exposing their flaws. You're exposing your own." She stood up, cleared the breakfast dishes. Her movements were economical, practiced. A woman who'd learned not to waste anything, including time or words. "Grace," I said, "thank you for being honest with me. That's what family does." She turned to look at me. "And Abigail, whatever happens with your other children, Isaac and I are here. Not for your money. For you. Remember that too." She disappeared into the bedroom to finally get some sleep, leaving me alone with my coffee and my thoughts. She was right. About everything. This test would reveal more than I'd planned. It would show the world, and my children, that I was just as flawed as they were. But it was too late to turn back now. I pulled out the burner phone and texted Thomas. "Today, 10 a.m., send everyone." His response was immediate. "Confirmed. Are you ready?" I looked around Isaac's small kitchen, at the mismatched dishes, the worn linoleum, the refrigerator covered in photos of happier times. Was I ready? No, but I was doing it anyway. At 9:45 a.m., I heard vehicles pull up outside. Grace was still sleeping. I'd changed back into my dirty street clothes for effect. I needed Elizabeth and William to see exactly what their mother had looked like when she knocked on their doors. Through the window, I saw 2 black SUVs park on the street. Thomas emerged from the first one impeccably dressed as always. His assistant, a young woman named Rebecca, followed with a briefcase. From the second vehicle, 2 security guards stepped out. They looked like businessmen in their suits, but I knew they were the team who'd been tracking me all week. Thomas walked up the cracked path and knocked quietly. I opened the door before the sound could wake Grace. "Abigail." He looked me up and down, his professional mask slipping for just a moment. "My God, you really committed to this. Come in, quietly. Grace is sleeping." Thomas and Rebecca entered. The security team stayed outside, positioning themselves discreetly around the property. "I called Elizabeth and William this morning," Thomas said, opening his briefcase. "Told them there was urgent news about your estate. Said they needed to be here by 10 a.m. sharp. How did they react?" Elizabeth panicked. "Thought you'd died." William was annoyed about the timing. Said he had a surgery scheduled. Thomas pulled out documents. Neither of them asked where here was until I gave them the address. Then there was a long silence. They realized it was Isaac's house. "Yes. Elizabeth asked why we were meeting at your son's rental. William asked if this was some kind of intervention." Thomas looked at me seriously. "Abigail, last chance. We can call this off. I can tell them it was a misunderstanding, and you can know." My voice was firm. "I need to see this through." Isaac appeared from the bathroom, his hair still wet from a shower. He'd come home early, Thomas had told him to. He looked between us, confused. "Mom." "What's going on? Who are these people?" Before I could answer, Grace emerged from the bedroom. She'd been awake, I realized. Listening. "Your mother is about to reveal the truth," Grace said calmly. "And your siblings are about to arrive." Isaac's face went pale. "What truth? What's happening?" "Isaac, sit down." I gestured to the couch. "There's something I need to tell you before they get here." I told him everything. The test, the fake bankruptcy, the week on the streets, visiting his siblings first, their rejections. With every word, Isaac's face grew more shocked, more hurt. "You lied to us," he finally said. "This whole thing was a lie. The homelessness was a lie, but the test was real, and your response was real." "Jesus, Mom." He stood up, paced across the small room. "Do you know how scared I was? How worried Grace and I were going to give up our— He stopped, glanced at Grace. Your baby fund, I finished quietly. I know, I heard you last night. Isaac's eyes filled with tears. And you let us plan to sacrifice that for you when you never needed it. I needed to know who you were, all of you, without the money clouding everything. That's manipulative. His voice rose. That's Isaac. Grace put her hand on his arm. She's right. She needed to know. And we passed. We showed her who we are. By being deceived. No, by being ourselves. Grace looked at me. The test was valid even if the situation was fake. How we responded showed our character. Nothing fake about that. Isaac slumped back onto the couch, his head in his hands. Outside, I heard car doors slam. Expensive car doors, the kind that close with a solid luxury thunk. Elizabeth and William had arrived. Thomas moved to the window. They're here, both of them, with their spouses. Good, I said. I want Robert and Jennifer to see this too. Mom, I don't know if I can— Isaac started. You need to be here, I said firmly. You need to witness this, because this isn't just about them. It's about validating that your way of living, your way of loving is the right one. Footsteps on the porch. Voices. Elizabeth and William talking in low tones. The knock came, sharp and impatient. Thomas opened the door. Elizabeth stood on the porch in a cream-colored cashmere coat and designer boots. Robert beside her in a suit that probably cost $3,000. Behind them, William and Jennifer, equally polished and expensive. All four of them stared at Isaac's humble house like they'd been summoned to a crime scene. Thomas, Elizabeth's voice was sharp with anxiety. What's this about where's our mother? Is she— She stopped, because she'd seen me standing in Isaac's living room. Her mouth fell open. Mom? William pushed past her. What the hell is going on? Why are you here? Why do you still look— He gestured at my dirty clothes, my unwashed hair. Come in, I said calmly. All of you. We need to talk. They filed inside, their eyes scanning the small space with barely concealed distaste. Elizabeth's gaze lingered on the patched couch. William's on the mismatched furniture. Robert and Jennifer hung back, clearly uncomfortable. Why are we meeting here? Elizabeth demanded. Thomas said there was urgent news about your estate, about your situation. There is. I moved to the center of the room. Thomas stood beside me like a lawyer preparing to present evidence. Isaac and Grace sat together on the couch, Isaac's jaw tight, Grace's face calm. Mom, seriously, what's going on? William checked his watch. I have a patient in 2 hours. This better be important. Oh, it's important. I took a breath. Thomas, show them. Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. He laid them on the coffee table one by one. Financial statements, bank records, company reports. Elizabeth leaned forward to look. Her face went from confused to shocked to horrified in the span of 10 seconds. These numbers, she whispered. This says the company made record profits last quarter. That's correct, Thomas said. William grabbed another document. This is your personal account. It shows— He looked up at me, his face pale. $58 million. Also correct. The silence in the room was deafening. I don't understand, Elizabeth said slowly. You said you were bankrupt. You said you lost everything. I lied. The words hung in the air like a bomb. You lied? William's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes, there was no bankruptcy, no creditors, no losses. I never lost anything. I looked at each of them in turn. Except my illusions about my children. Elizabeth stood up abruptly. You're saying this was all fake. The homelessness, the desperation, all of it. Every bit of it, except my need for shelter. That was real, and so were your responses. This is insane, William exploded. You put us through this as some kind of sick test. Yes. How dare you? Elizabeth's voice cracked. How dare you manipulate us like this? Make us worry, make us feel guilty. Feel guilty, I cut her off. Tell me, Elizabeth, what exactly made you feel guilty? Was it closing the door in my face? Was it choosing your dinner party over your mother's safety? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I turned to William. And you? You gave me money and sent me to a hotel because having your homeless mother in your house might affect your precious reputation. That's not fair, William said. I was trying to help in a practical. My voice rose. Your mother was on the street, and you were worried about optics. This isn't fair. Elizabeth was crying now. You set us up. You created an impossible situation and then judged us for how we reacted. No, Elizabeth, I created a simple situation. Your mother needed help. The test wasn't complicated. It was, will you open your door or close it? I gestured to Isaac and Grace. They passed, without hesitation, without conditions, without worrying about what anyone would think. Isaac stood up. His voice was tight when he spoke. Don't use us as weapons against them, Mom. We didn't know this was a test. We just did what we thought was right. Exactly. You did what was right. They did what was convenient. Robert, Elizabeth's husband, spoke for the first time. Elizabeth, is this true? You turned your mother away. Elizabeth whirled on him. You were the one worried about the partners, about the dinner. Don't you dare. I never said to close the door on your mother. Robert's face was red. I never said that. Jennifer stepped forward, looking at William. You sent your mother to a hotel while she was homeless. I gave her $2,000, William defended. I tried to help. You tried to make the problem go away, Jennifer said quietly. That's not the same thing. The room erupted. Elizabeth and Robert arguing, William defending his actions to Jennifer, Isaac trying to stay out of it, Grace watching everything with sad eyes. I let them fight, let the truth tear through their carefully constructed facades. Finally, Thomas raised his voice. Everyone, quiet, please. The arguments died down to angry mutters. Thomas pulled out one more document. Mrs. Miller asked me to prepare papers modifying her will. I have them here. Every eye in the room turned to him. The original plan, Thomas continued, was to disinherit Elizabeth and William entirely, to leave everything to Isaac and Grace. Elizabeth gasped. William went rigid. However, Thomas said, glancing at me, Isaac and Grace convinced Mrs. Miller to reconsider. They argued for mercy, for second chances. I stepped forward. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not changing my will today, but I am setting conditions. Conditions. William's voice was cold. Yes, if you want to remain in my will, if you want any chance at inheriting what I've built, you will meet these requirements. I pulled out the list I'd written with Thomas. Read it aloud. Family therapy, weekly, for 2 years. Community service, at homeless shelters. Elizabeth, 200 hours. William, 150. Financial independence. Live without my money for 1 full year. Genuine relationship. Monthly family dinners. No gift giving, just presents. These are the conditions, I finished. You have 1 week to decide if you'll accept them. If you don't, you're out of the will. Everything goes to charity. Elizabeth was shaking. You can't do this. You can't blackmail us into... I'm not blackmailing you. I'm giving you a choice. Choose money over relationship and you get nothing. Choose relationship over money and maybe you get both. This is cruel, William said. No, William. Cruel is sending your mother to a hotel when she needs family. This is consequences. Grace stood up. Her voice was calm but carried weight. Elizabeth, William, can I say something? Everyone turned to her. The daughter-in-law they'd always looked down on. The woman they'd thought wasn't good enough. You're angry right now. I understand. But your mother is giving you something valuable. She's giving you a chance to rebuild what's broken, to become people you can respect. Grace looked at me, then back at them. Don't waste it. Elizabeth sank into a chair, her face in her hands. Robert stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, looking shaken. William stared at the documents on the table like they might bite him. Finally, Robert spoke. Elizabeth, I think you should do this. She looked up at him, mascara running. I married you for who you were, not for your inheritance, but I want you to be someone our future kids can be proud of. His voice was gentle. This is hard, but it's fair. Jennifer nodded. William, I agree. We don't need your mother's money, but you need your mother. I watched my 2 oldest children grapple with a choice they never thought they'd have to make. Family or fortune, love or legacy, who they were or who they could become. I need to think, Elizabeth whispered. You have 1 week, I repeated. 1 week to decide what matters more. Thomas started gathering documents. I'll send formal copies to both of you. Review them with your lawyers if you wish, but the terms are non-negotiable. Isaac walked to the door, opened it. A clear dismissal. Elizabeth and William left without another word. Their spouses followed, but both Robert and Jennifer looked back at me. In their eyes, I saw something that gave me hope. They understood, even if their partners didn't yet. When the door closed, the small house felt suddenly quiet. Isaac turned to me. I don't know how I feel about this, Mom. I know, and that's okay. You used us. You used Grace and me as the standard they failed to meet. You're right, I did. And I'm sorry for that. Grace took Isaac's hand. Isaac, your mom is trying to fix something broken. She's not doing it perfectly, but she's trying. He looked at her for a long moment, then back at me. I love you, Mom, but I'm really angry with you right now. I know. You have every right to be. I need some time. He walked out, got in his old car, and drove away. Grace stayed behind. He'll come around, she said quietly. He just needs to process. And you? I asked. How do you feel about all this? She considered. I think you did what you thought you had to do. I don't agree with all your methods, but I understand the desperation behind them. She paused. The question is, what now? What now indeed? I'd revealed the truth, set the terms, drawn the lines. But Grace was right. Truth cut both ways, and I had a lot of truth to face about myself. The first 3 days were the hardest. I moved into a hotel, a real one this time, not pretend homelessness. Thomas insisted, said I needed space to process everything that had happened. He was right, though I hated admitting it. Isaac didn't call, didn't text. The silence from my youngest son hurt worse than anything Elizabeth or William had done. On Monday evening, my phone finally rang. Grace. He's not ready to talk yet, she said without preamble. But he asked me to check on you, make sure you're okay. I'm fine. How is he? Angry? Confused? Hurt? She paused. But he's thinking. Really thinking about everything. That's good. Grace, I'm sorry I put you both through this. I know you are. And Abigail, he'll forgive you. He just needs time to understand why you did what you did. After she hung up, I sat in my hotel room and cried. Real tears this time. Not from the test, but from the realization that even doing the right thing, exposing the truth, came with casualties. Tuesday morning, Thomas called. Elizabeth wants to meet. Just her, without Robert. We're coffee shop, downtown, 2 o'clock. My hands shook as I got ready. I dressed carefully, not the expensive suits I usually wore to intimidate, but simple slacks and a sweater. I wanted to look like a mother, not a CEO. Elizabeth was already there when I arrived. She sat in a corner booth staring into a cup of coffee she clearly hadn't touched. No makeup today. Hair pulled back simply. She looked younger, without all the armor. I slid into the booth across from her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I didn't sleep for 3 days, Elizabeth finally said. I kept seeing your face when I closed that door, kept hearing the sound of the deadbolt. Elizabeth, let me finish, please. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. I've been thinking about who I've become, about how I got here. And Mom, I hate what I see. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I used to be different. Remember, I used to volunteer at the shelter in college. I used to care about people, not just about what people thought of me. I remember. Somewhere along the way, I lost that person. And the worst part is I didn't even notice it happening. She looked up at me. When did I become someone who values a dinner party over her own mother? When I taught you that money and appearances were what mattered most, I said quietly. This is my fault, Elizabeth. I created the environment that— No, she cut me off firmly. I'm an adult. I made my own choices. Yes, you taught me some wrong lessons, but I chose to learn them. I chose to prioritize what the neighbors thought over what was right. She pulled out her phone, scrolled, then turned it to show me. This is the shelter I called that night. After I closed the door, I paid for 3 nights for a homeless woman who came to my house. I told myself I was helping. I saw the receipt. $300 to a local shelter. But it wasn't enough, was it? Elizabeth continued. I threw money at this problem so I could feel better without actually having to do anything hard, without having to choose you over my comfortable life. You're being very hard on yourself. I deserve it. She wiped her eyes. Robert and I had a long talk. A really long talk. He told me he's ashamed of me. Not angry. Ashamed. Do you know how much that hurt? Elizabeth. But he's right. I should be ashamed. I closed the door on my mother because I was worried about what the wives at the country club would think. She laughed bitterly. The wives at the country club? Jesus, Mom. When did that become more important than you? She reached across the table and took my hand. I want to do the therapy, the community service, all of it. Not because of the money, because I need to find that person I used to be, before I became this. It won't be easy. Good. It shouldn't be. Easy things don't change you. She squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. We sat there for another hour, talking, really talking, not about money or renovations or social status, about feelings, about regrets, about how to rebuild something broken. When we parted, Elizabeth hugged me, a real hug, not the Air Kiss Society hug she usually gave me. I love you, Mom, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart. Wednesday brought a different kind of call. William wants to meet. Thomas sounded surprised. But he's bringing his lawyer. Of course he is. We met in Thomas's office, neutral ground. William arrived in a suit, his lawyer beside him. Jennifer wasn't with him, and I wondered what that meant. William's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison, spread papers on the conference table. Mrs. Miller, my client has concerns about the conditions you've outlined. I'm sure he does. The requirement to live without financial support for a full year, that's unreasonable given Dr. Hayes's current financial commitments. Then he should learn to live within his means, I said calmly. William finally spoke. Mom, I'm not Elizabeth. I'm not going to break down and apologize just because you guilt-tripped her. I didn't guilt-trip anyone. I told the truth. Your version of the truth. But here's mine. I tried to help you. I gave you $2,000. I offered to connect you with my accountant. I provided practical solutions. You sent me away. I gave you resources to solve your problem. His voice rose. What did you expect me to do? Let you move in indefinitely? Disrupt my entire life, my career, my marriage? I expected you to choose me over your career for one night, William. One night. That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The medical board review the reputation management, the excuses. I cut him off. You have excuses for everything except the only thing that mattered, being there for your mother. Harrison, the lawyer, tried to intervene. Mrs. Miller, perhaps we could negotiate modified terms. No. I looked directly at William. The terms are non-negotiable. Accept them or don't, but stop trying to logic your way out of accountability. William's jaw clenched. This is about control. You're punishing us for not doing exactly what you wanted. No, William. I'm giving you an opportunity to become someone worth respecting, but you have to actually want to change. He stood abruptly. I need to think about this. You have 4 more days. He left without another word. Harrison scrambled to gather papers and follow. Thomas looked at me after they'd gone. That didn't go well. No, it didn't. I felt exhausted. Do you think he'll accept the terms? Honestly, I don't know. William's pride might be too strong. That night, Jennifer called me, William's wife. He's struggling, she said quietly. He knows you're right, but admitting it means admitting he's been wrong for years. That's hard for William. I know. But I want you to know something. I told him if he doesn't do the therapy, if he doesn't try to fix this, I'm leaving him. I sat up straighter. Jennifer, I married a good man who became a cold one. I've watched him drift further and further into this world where logic trumps emotion, where efficiency matters more than humanity. I don't like who he's becoming. Her voice was firm. And I won't raise children with a man who sends his mother to a hotel when she needs family. Thank you for telling me. Don't thank me yet. He might choose his pride over everything, but at least you'll know I tried. Thursday afternoon, Elizabeth called again. Mom, I did something, and I need to tell you before you hear it from someone else. My heart sank. What did you do? I went to the country club today. You know, the one where all the wives meet for lunch, where everyone compares houses and vacations and pretends their lives are perfect. Elizabeth. I stood up in the middle of lunch, in front of 40 women, and I told them the truth. I couldn't breathe. What truth? That my mother came to my door homeless and desperate, and I closed the door in her face because I was worried what they would think. That I chose my social status over my own mother. Her voice cracked. I told them I was ashamed, that I was a terrible daughter, that I needed to do better. Oh, Elizabeth, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than any business presentation, harder than anything. Standing there watching their faces, seeing the judgment. She paused. But also seeing some of them cry. Some of them came up to me afterward, told me their own stories about failing their parents, about choosing wrong. How do you feel? Lighter, scared, but lighter. She laughed shakily. Robert says I'm the bravest person he knows. Can you believe that after everything? Yes, I can believe that. I start at the homeless shelter tomorrow, volunteering, 4 hours a week to start. More than the conditions require, but I need to do this, Mom. I need to see the people I treated like they were invisible. I'm proud of you. Don't be proud yet. I have a long way to go, but I'm trying. I'm really trying. Friday evening, Isaac finally called. Can we talk in person? Of course, anywhere you want. My house, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. When I arrived Saturday morning, Isaac and Grace were both there. The house still looked the same, humble, worn, loved, but something felt different. Isaac gestured to the couch. We all sat. I've been thinking, Isaac started, about what you did, about why you did it, and Grace helped me understand something. Grace smiled softly but let him continue. You were desperate, Isaac said. Desperate to know if we loved you or your money. And I get it. I understand that desperation. He paused. But Mom, you hurt me. You let me worry, let me plan to give up something important, all while knowing it was theater. I know. I'm sorry. Let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. You hurt me. But you also showed me something. You showed me that Grace and I were doing it right, that our choice to live simply to prioritize love over money, to help without conditions, that was right. That mattered. He took Grace's hand. Elizabeth and William, they failed your test. But it wasn't because they're bad people. It's because they learned the wrong lessons. From society, from their environment, from you. I know. So here's what I want to say. I forgive you for deceiving us. But you need to forgive yourself for creating the situation that made this test necessary in the first place. His words hit deep. Grace nodded in agreement. You're right, I whispered. You're absolutely right. And one more thing. Isaac leaned forward. We're pregnant. I gasped. What? Grace was beaming. Found out yesterday. 8 weeks. We didn't even know when all of this was happening. We're having a baby, Mom, Isaac said, grinning now. And we want you to be part of that child's life. We want them to know their grandmother. The real you, not the performance. I started crying. Happy tears this time. But that means you need to keep working on yourself too, Grace added. Keep being honest. Keep facing the hard truths. For all of us. I will. I promise I will. We spent the morning together. They told me about their plans for the baby, about how scared and excited they were, about names they were considering. For the first time in years, I felt like part of a real family. Sunday afternoon, the deadline, Thomas's office, 4 o'clock. I arrived early. Thomas was already there, documents prepared. Rebecca, his assistant, had coffee ready. Are you prepared for them not to show? Thomas asked gently. Yes. No, I don't know. At 3:55, Elizabeth arrived with Robert. She looked nervous but determined. We're here to accept the conditions, she said immediately. All of them. We already started therapy. Our first session was Thursday. Robert added, and I want to apologize too, Mrs. Miller, for my part in Elizabeth's decision. I should have insisted she help you regardless of my career concerns. Thank you, Robert. 4:0 came and went. No William. 4:05. Elizabeth checked her phone. He's not coming, is he? Give him time, I said, though my heart was sinking. 4:10. Thomas started gathering papers. Perhaps we should... The door burst open. William stood there breathing hard like he'd run up the stairs. Jennifer was right behind him, her hand on his back. I'm here. Sorry, He struggled for words. I almost didn't come. But you did, I said quietly. Jennifer told me this morning that she'd leave me if I didn't. He looked at his wife. She said I'd become someone she didn't recognize. Someone cold and calculating and… He swallowed hard. And she was right. He walked to the conference table, stared at the documents Thomas had prepared. I don't want to do this, William said honestly. Every logical part of my brain is telling me this is manipulation, that I shouldn't let myself be controlled by conditions and ultimatums. Then don't, I said. He looked up surprised. If you're only doing this for the money, don't do it at all. Walk away. I'll donate everything to charity and we can all move on with our lives. But if you're doing it because you actually want to change, I continued, because you want to be someone your future children can respect, because you want real relationships instead of transactional ones, then stay. William looked at Jennifer. She nodded encouragingly. I want to change, he said finally. I don't want to be the person who sent his mother to a hotel. I don't want to look back in 20 years and realize I chose pride over love. He picked up a pen. Where do I sign? Thomas walked us through the documents. Both Elizabeth and William signed. Agreed to all conditions. Weekly therapy, community service, financial independence, real family time. When the paperwork was done, an awkward silence fell. So what now? Elizabeth asked. Now we start the hard work, I said. Now we see if we can actually rebuild something broken. I have a suggestion, Grace said. Everyone turned to her. Family dinner once a month at a different person's house each time. No gifts, no money discussions, just food and conversation and presence. That's part of the conditions, Thomas noted. I know, but let's start now. Not next month. Now. Grace looked at everyone. Tomorrow night. Our house. I'll cook. You don't have to, I started. I want to. We're family. Complicated, messy, broken family. But family. And families eat together. Elizabeth nodded slowly. Okay, I'll bring a salad. I can bring wine, Robert offered. William looked uncomfortable but said Jennifer makes excellent bread. We'll bring that. Then it's settled, Grace said. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock. Everyone comes as they are. No pretense. That night I called Thomas. Thank you for everything. You did the hard part, Abigail. I just handled the paperwork. Do you think it'll work? Do you think they can really change? Honestly, I don't know. Change is hard, but they're trying. That's more than most people do. He paused. And Abigail, you should be proud. Not just of them. Of yourself. You faced an ugly truth and decided to do something about it. After we hung up, I sat in my hotel room and thought about everything that had happened. The test, the revelations, the conditions, the commitments. Grace was right. Truth cut both ways, and I'd been cut as deeply as anyone. But maybe that's what healing required. Getting cut open so the infection could drain. Painful but necessary. I fell asleep that night, hoping tomorrow's dinner would be the first step towards something real. The family dinners became our anchor. Once a month, every month. We rotated houses. Sometimes the conversations were awkward. Sometimes old patterns resurfaced and someone had to call it out. But we kept showing up. Elizabeth threw herself into change like it was a project. She completed her shelter hours in 3 months, then kept volunteering. She started a blog about privilege and responsibility that went viral. She and Robert joined a simpler church, made friends who didn't care about country clubs. I'm sleeping better, she told me at July's dinner. For the first time in years, I'm sleeping through the night. William's transformation was slower, more resistant. But Jennifer's ultimatum had been real, and he'd chosen his marriage over his pride. He started the pro bono clinic work. At first, he did it mechanically, checking off hours. But something shifted when he met Daniel. Daniel was a homeless veteran with a failing heart. No insurance, no money, no hope. William operated on him, saved his life, spent his own money on follow-up care. It was the first surgery in years that felt like it mattered, William admitted at September's dinner. His voice cracked. I'd forgotten why I became a doctor. I'd forgotten it was supposed to be about helping people, not building a reputation. The family therapy sessions were brutal. Dr. Harrison, our therapist, didn't let anyone hide. She made us confront ugly truths, made me admit how I'd taught them that money equaled love, made them admit how they'd internalized that lesson. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Harrison said in one session. You'll take steps forward and steps back. What matters is you keep walking. Isaac and Grace's pregnancy progressed. We threw a baby shower, a simple one at their house with homemade decorations. Elizabeth and Jennifer organized it together. William researched the best pediatricians and made calls on Isaac's behalf. Small acts of love, building blocks of a new foundation. 9 months after the test. November, Thomas called us all to his office. Abigail has finalized her will. She wants to review it with everyone present. We gathered. All of us. Elizabeth and Robert, William and Jennifer, Isaac and Grace, now 8 months pregnant. Thomas distributed copies of the will. I want to explain my decisions, I said, standing at the head of the table. I've thought about this carefully, discussed it with Thomas, prayed about it. I looked at each of my children. To Elizabeth, 25% of my estate, conditional on maintaining the changes you've made, continuing therapy, continuing service. If those conditions aren't met within the next year, your portion goes to the homeless shelter you've been volunteering at. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mom. To William, 25% of my estate, same conditions, therapy service, real relationships. If not maintained, your portion funds free medical clinics for underserved communities. William nodded, unable to speak. To Isaac, 30% of my estate, unconditional, for passing the test, for showing me what real love looks like, for teaching me as much as I taught you. Isaac took Grace's hand. That's too much, Mom. No, it's exactly right. And the remaining 20%, Thomas prompted. To Grace, I looked at my daughter-in-law. For being wise enough to see through my test, for choosing authenticity anyway, for teaching this family what grace really means. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Abigail, I can't. You can and you will. You've earned it by being who you are. I smiled. Besides, someone needs to make sure Isaac doesn't give it all away to his students. Everyone laughed, even Isaac. But there's one more thing, I said. I'm not dead yet, and I don't plan to be for a long time. This will is just a plan. What matters more is what we do now, how we love now, how we show up for each other now. Elizabeth stood up. Mom, can I say something? Of course. I know I don't deserve the grace you've shown me, the second chance. But I promise you, I'm not going to waste it. She looked around the table. Robert and I have been talking. We're selling the mansion, moving to a smaller house, donating the difference to homeless causes. Robert nodded. It's time to live differently. William cleared his throat. Jennifer and I have decided something too. We're starting a foundation, free medical care for homeless veterans, in honor of Daniel and others like him. And I'm cutting back my practice, he added, spending more time on what matters, less time chasing status. I felt tears running down my face. I'm so proud of all of you. We wouldn't be here without the test, Elizabeth said, without you being brave enough to show us who we'd become. Or without Isaac and Grace showing us who we could be, William added, looking at his younger brother with genuine respect. Thanksgiving. Not at a mansion, not at a fancy restaurant. At Isaac and Grace's house, the 3-bedroom house I'd bought them, now filled with baby toys and laughter. Thomas William Isaac Miller was 6 months old. He had his father's eyes and his mother's smile, and the entire family wrapped around his tiny finger. We gathered around their table, still mismatched plates, still simple food, but so much love. Elizabeth brought sweet potatoes she'd made herself. William brought wine he'd actually researched instead of buying the most expensive bottle. Robert told Dad jokes that made everyone groan. Jennifer taught Isaac how to properly carve a turkey, and Grace held baby Thomas while I sat beside her, my grandson's tiny hand wrapped around my finger. Tell him the story, Isaac said, about his crazy grandmother who pretended to be homeless. He's too young for that story, I protested. No one's too young for the truth, Grace said wisely. Besides, it's a good story, about tests and second chances and how families can heal. So I told it, the whole story, the test, the rejections, the one door that opened, the revelations and conditions and hard work that followed. And the moral, Elizabeth asked, bouncing Thomas gently. That love isn't measured in money, I said. It's measured in presence, in sacrifice, in choosing people over comfort. And in forgiveness, William added, both giving it and accepting it. And in grace, Grace said, smiling at me. Always in grace. We ate together, talked and laughed and told stories. Not perfect. Still working through things. Still learning. But together. Real family. At the end of the night, as people were getting ready to leave, Elizabeth pulled me aside. "Mom, I've been thinking about that week. When you knocked on my door and I closed it." "Elizabeth, we've moved past." "I know, but I want to say this. That moment, that choice, it was the worst thing I ever did. But it was also the catalyst for the best thing. It forced me to look at who I'd become. To choose differently." She hugged me tight. "So thank you. For being brave enough to test us. To show us the truth. Thank you for being brave enough to change." William appeared. "Can I join this gratitude circle?" We laughed. The three of us hugged. My children, flawed and struggling and trying, just like their mother. "I love you both," I said. "Not for what you have or what you do, just for who you are." "That's all we ever wanted," William said quietly. Isaac and Grace stood in the doorway watching. Isaac held Thomas, bouncing him gently. "You know what he's going to inherit," Isaac said, gesturing to his son. "Not millions of dollars. Those are just numbers. He's going to inherit this. A family that learned how to love each other for real. That's the real inheritance." He was right. That was the real test all along. Not whether my children would open their doors, but whether I had the courage to face the truth about what I'd created. Whether any of us could change. The answer was yes. Messy, painful, imperfect, yes. But yes. I stood on Isaac's porch as everyone drove away. The November air was cold, but I felt warm, complete in a way I hadn't in years. Thomas called. "How was dinner?" "Perfect. Imperfectly perfect." "That's the best kind." He paused. "You did good, Abigail. With the test, with the conditions, with giving them a chance to change. We'll see. They still have work to do." "Don't we all?" He laughed. "But they're trying. That's what counts." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a moment, looked back at Isaac's house, the lights glowing warm, the humble home that had taught me more about wealth than all my millions ever could. I thought about Marie, the woman I'd met at the bus station, the one who shared her sandwich. I'd tracked her down afterward, got her into housing, helped her reconnect with her daughter. She called me last week. "You saved my life," she said. But really, she'd saved mine. By showing me what generosity looked like when you had nothing. By reminding me that invisibility was a choice, and I could choose to see people. I started my car and drove home. Not to a mansion, not to a penthouse, to a comfortable condo that felt like me. On my refrigerator was a photo from Thanksgiving. All of us together. Elizabeth with her arm around William. Isaac holding Thomas. Grace laughing at something Robert said. Jennifer wiping sweet potato off Jennifer's face. Imperfect. Real. Family. The test was over. The work continued. And I wouldn't have it any other way.